Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a showdown between paralyzed Vietnam veterans when I put Hal Ashby's Coming Home against Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July. And this one was a hard decision to make too, man, because both of these movies are very powerful and they deal with very sensitive subjects, you know. So let's just dive right on in to the nitty and the picky, you know. I'll probably will pick apart plot, but it's also more the content of the film and, you know, what it's saying and how it says it type thing. But first up, we have Hal Ashby's Coming Home, which was co-written by the great Waldo Salt, who also wrote the screenplay for Midnight Cowboy, which also starred Jon Voight, who is one of the three main actors in this film. It stars Jon Voight, Jane Fonda, and Bruce Dern. And of course, Jon Voight and Jane Fonda both won Academy Awards for this film, this being Jane Fonda's second Oscar. The first one, of course, she won for Clute. Now, Jon Voight in this film plays a disabled Vietnam veteran who's paralyzed from the waist down and stuff. And, you know, the film opens brilliantly, where we see a lot of these disabled veterans in the VA hospital, and they're playing a game of pool, and, you know, they're having a kind of a discussion about the war and, you know, all the controversy around it, the kind of the mindset and everything. And, you know, and then it just like cuts. Now, one thing about it too, the use of the music in this film is absolutely brilliant, because it definitely takes a lot of the songs that were popular at the time, but honestly, not a lot of the songs that you would think that would normally get used in like movies that were like period pieces of this time. And that could also be because of the recency, you know, because the film itself, it was released in 1978, which is about maybe a decade after the movie takes place. And so it opens with the Rolling Stones' Out of Time, and we see Bruce Dern's character jogging, running, whatever the fuck, through the damn military base and stuff. And Bruce Dern, yeah, he's about to be sent to Vietnam, and he very much wants to go to Vietnam. He wants to be a hero, just like all the men that came before him, you know, the ones that got all the glory in World War II and all that shit. And he's married to Jane Fonda, Hanoi Jane, if you will, which that was also like a very interesting casting choices. Of course, you know, Jane Fonda had all that controversy with being on the Viet Cong side over there in Vietnam, you know, where she got dubbed Hanoi Jane and stuff. And so she's the wife of this military guy. And once he goes off to Vietnam, she ends up kind of doing her own thing. She starts volunteering at the VA hospital. She makes a friend who also works there and stuff. And that's where she meets Jon Voight's character. And I believe his name's Luke in the film. And they had went to high school together. And so they kind of reconnect through that. And they kind of start a relationship and stuff. And, you know, we see like Jon Voight have that, you know, mental breakdown in the beginning of the film. But we see kind of him, you know, as he gets better treatment and stuff. He ends up getting released, you know, and of course Jane Fonda's character also helps him overcome a lot of his shit and stuff. And then when, you know, Bruce Dern comes back, he finds out that, you know, they had been fucking, you know, it's a whole different kind of Jody, one that actually served in the war, and then, you know, now is fucking this dude's wife and shit. The film is very layered. There's a lot of shit that goes down in this film, and the characters are very complex. You know, there's not a lot of shit that's cut and dry, and which in and of itself is a hell of a metaphor for the Vietnam War, because there was nothing cut and dry about that war, and it kind of like shows all sides of it, because you got Jon Voight's character not too dissimilar from Ron Kovic, who Tom Cruise plays in Born on the 4th of July. Ron Kovic, of course, was a real person, and that's who Tom Cruise is portraying in Born on the 4th of July. But, you know, somebody that fully went into the war, bought into the bullshit propaganda, and then ended up paralyzed, and then realizing, you know, he was fed a bunch of lies. That ending scene where he's talking in front of all those school children, that is a very powerful scene, and that's probably what won him the fucking Oscar, because, like, you know, Jon Voight gives a powerful fucking performance. And of course, even Bruce Dern, Like his probably the most complex character, because you get the sense when he comes back wounded, it's not overtly stated, but you get the idea this motherfucker shot himself in the leg to get out of that shit. Because when Jane Fonda's character goes to visit him in Hong Kong when he's on his R&R, you get the sense like he was way over his head. He couldn't handle that shit, and he had to find a way out, and he did. And that's why he ended up running into the ocean and killing himself in the end of the film. Because, you know, not only is he a coward, but he also was made a cuckold by somebody that was probably braver than he was, and he couldn't handle that shit, you know. And so everybody in this film is absolutely brilliant. And we'll move forward to Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July, which is the second film in his so-called Vietnam War trilogy. Of course, the first one being Platoon, which was about his own experiences, or based off of his own experiences in Vietnam. And then we get Born on the 4th of July, which is based off of Ron Kovic's book, who also co-wrote the script with Oliver Stone, and that is the character that Tom Cruise is playing in the film. And we see Ron Kovic's life, you know, his early childhood, and then all the way into high school, where when he goes off into Vietnam, and we don't see him in basic training, but we do see him in Vietnam and all the shit that he encounters. And then when he gets paralyzed, we see him that horrendous Bronx hospital and stuff that and all the shit that he has to go through, and then having to go back home and deal with all that other shit. And he maintains his like heavy patriotic self all up until, like, you know, he kind of runs into his old flame played by Kira Sedgwick, and then it steadily emerges from that. He even goes down to Mexico, where he runs into a bunch of other disabled Vietnam vets, one of them played by Willem Dafoe, who was also in Platoon. A few other ones pop up from Platoon. Tom Berenger plays a Marine in this in a very small role, one of the two Marines that are talking to the high school class that Kovic is in. And also we do John C. McGinley pops up at the end. Of course, he was in Platoon as well. And we then see him kind of become more involved in the anti-war movement and shit once he gets back from Mexico. There are a lot of great sequences in this film, you know, but I have my biggest complaint is that Tom Cruise is such a trash actor. You know, he has a tendency to overact, and, you know, not as much of a hindrance in a film like this, because Oliver Stone has a tendency to over direct. He has this a tendency to be a little heavy handed with his shit. Now, like Platoon, that's a perfect movie, and by the time he gets to Born on the 4th of July, he's getting to that crescendo of over the topness and stuff, and it just doesn't sell well, because one, it doesn't really say much about what it's trying to say. He's trying to convey more with images. And one thing that bugs the shit out of me too about Born on the 4th of July is John Williams' score. You know, and I'm gonna say this, and a lot of people are gonna fucking hate it, but John Williams is probably the most overrated film composer of all time. Now, granted, dude does have 3 of the most iconic film scores: Jaws, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones. But everything else sounds the fucking same, just recycled fucking shit that he did in other movies and stuff. And it doesn't fit well. You know, granted, you want to talk shit about the music. Fucking Hal Ashby used 6 fucking Rolling Stone songs in Coming Home. He opens and closes with the same one, but 6 different Rolling Stone songs. And you thought Martin Scorsese had a hard-on for the Rolling Stones. I mean, but also Hal Ashby is one of the 3 high-profile directors to do a Rolling Stones concert movie. Let's Spend the Night Together. Of course, Jean-Luc Godard did Sympathy for the Devil, and Martin Scorsese did Shine a Light. But the use of the music in Coming Home is way fucking better, because he uses the popular music to convey a lot of the emotions going on in the film. Like, Hey Jude is playing when Bruce Dern's going off to Vietnam and stuff, and it's done so beautiful. And Time Has Come Again, that the way they use that to like build up the fucking tension, because that's a goddamn 10-minute song. And, you know, the instrumental, like, this is like shit that, like, the only other motherfucker to pull off shit like this was Scorsese, as far as like using the way he used fucking Can't You Hear Me Knocking in Casino. But that's neither here nor there. the acting too is way fucking better. It's like you gotta wait till about an hour and a half into Born on the 4th of July for a real actor to show up. That's the fucking great Willem Dafoe. And, you know, and he's barely in the fucking movie, you know, like you do see some heartbreaking moments and stuff, but what Born on the 4th of July is trying to say, Jon Voight said it in that ending monologue in Coming Home. And even all through that shit, you know, we see the transition and how war affects people. It's a very like Coming Home is essentially the best years of our lives equivalent for Vietnam. And you know, even that relationship that Jon Voight and Jane Fonda have, it's not overstated. And how it comes out is even more fucking crazy because, you know, when he chains himself to that fucking recruitment office after Robert Carradine kills himself, it's fucking insane. Because now they're following him because, you know, the fucking feds and shit, and they catch them fucking, and that's how Bruce Dern finds out, and he tells them, and that scene when he confronts both of like, and he's got the gun, and man, you know, it's just, there's a lot of like so many fucking layers. Like honestly, I can talk so much about Coming Home, and that's why at Coming Home's clearly got to take this round because that is a very underrated film. Like, because of course Hal Ashby, one of the most underrated directors of all time. I mean, this motherfucker could make a like just real, powerful, and honest, and just in your face. And of course, like both movies had phenomenal director of like cinematographers, because you Coming Home has Haskell Wexler as the director of photography, and Born on the 4th of July has Robert Richardson. Those are two of the greatest cinematographers to ever fucking grace the cinema. And you know, both films look good, but it's at the end of the day, it's the acting and what they were trying to say. Because like you don't even see, like you have the perfect opportunity to have a great monologue at the end of Born on the 4th of July, really like sum up what the movie's about, and it doesn't, because also the parallel action in Coming Home is fucking brilliant, because as Jon Voight is addressing this group of school children and just the powerfulness of that speech, we see Bruce Dern preparing to fucking kill himself and running off naked into the fucking ocean and shit while his wife's out buying steaks to celebrate this fucking medal that he didn't fucking deserve. It's fucking poetry. That's what Coming Home is. So Coming Home clearly takes this round. For anybody keeping score, that is 90 to 70. 70s are up by 20 now. That lead continues to grow because the thing about it is the 70s was a time where you could make adult films, like, but not like adult in the sense of fucking like porn or anything, but adult in the sense of maturity. Because even in 1978, the Vietnam War was still a touchy fucking subject. You know, it had only been over for maybe like 5 years, you know, not maybe not even 5 years. I think maybe 75 is when it was officially over, something like 3 or 4 years. This shit, it was still fresh on the minds of people. And it was only around that time that you could start making movies about, like actual serious movies about Vietnam. You know, it was also the same year that The Deer Hunter came out, and the year before Apocalypse Now would come out. And this movie, it doesn't show any of the actual like Vietnam War. What you see is the effect that it has on the people at home and the people that went through the shit. Because what it also, that the way the VA hospital scenes, you know, because it is like way over the top in Born on the 4th of July, and it's all done for shock value. What Hal Ashby does that Oliver Stone doesn't really know how to do is to let the images speak for themselves. You don't have to overdo shit. Sometimes less is more. Now, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. It's just one asshole's opinion on a very long, self-indulgent journey just to figure out which decade was better for movies. And it's looking like the 70s because they're up by 20 now. So 90 to 70. This shit's getting insane. It's a real fucking mess out there, but we're going to sift through it.